1708. Across the Atlantic, merchant ships slice through the waves heavy with sugar, tobacco, and human lives. The transatlantic slave trade has reached its brutal peak. European empires, hungry for power, treat souls like cargo. Aboard these vessels, beneath the creaking masts and damp decks, stories unfold most are never told. Tonight, you will live one. You are a Flemish midwife from Bruges. You never sought the sea. You only agreed to board this ship to help a sailor's wife give birth. Just a few days, just a favor. But now, the sails are full, the harbor is gone, and what awaits beyond the horizon is not silence, but revolt. The ship is bound for Curaçao, but before it reaches the Caribbean, the lower decks will rise in rage, chains will shatter, blood will stain the planks, and in the storm of violence and justice, your only protection will be a pair of steady hands, an urgent voice, and the newborn you helped deliver. If this story moves you, if it chills your bones or opens your heart, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with others who believe that the past should never be forgotten. Now close your eyes and breathe. The tide is rising. The lantern swings gently above you, casting long, golden shadows across the slatted dock, where ropes thump dully against barnacle-covered pilings, and the smell of dried fish clings to your apron like regret. You stand beside a trunk you did not pack, containing linen you did not stitch, beside a woman you do not know except for the swelling at her belly and the way her hand, calloused from sailcloth mending, clutches yours like she's already drowning. You had not planned on leaving Bruges, and certainly not like this no bon voyage, no good luck from neighbors, only a hastily scribbled note to your cousin, and the childless echo of your footsteps down the gangplank. The merchantman looms above you like a stone cathedral turned to rot and canvas, her sails slack as tongues, her name carved into her side in flaking paint. De Zevenhuvelen, 7 hills. You say nothing of the irony. The ship is Dutch-built, now captained by a Spaniard, crewed by a slurry of Flemish, Portuguese, Walloons, and English drunks. A floating tower of Babel, if ever there was one. And it is to this ship that you offer your skill not as a sailor, or trader, or priest, but as a midwife, summoned at the urgent request of a sailor's wife too round and too poor to give birth on land. You only meant to deliver a child, but already the salt clings to your skin, and something in your chest prickles not from fear, exactly, but a quiet tightening, the way thread pulls beneath a seam you cannot yet see unraveling. The dockhands load the final crates tobacco, iron bars, dyed wool, casks marked with a V you do not recognize. The sailor, whose name you barely caught. Matthias nods to you once, too brisk to be polite, too tired to be cruel. His wife is named Liev, and her face is pale beneath the freckled flush of coming labor. She says little, save for the small sighs she lets out between the shifting of her weight and the pinching of her lips, as if trying to trap pain with breath alone. The moment your boots leave the dock, and the ship rocks beneath you, you feel it not fear, not yet, but dislocation, a sense that the world has tilted off its axis, and you've agreed, for reasons unknown even to you, to go with it. A boy leads you below decks no older than 14, barefoot, hair the color of burnt sugar. He doesn't speak Flemish. He gestures instead. The quarters are cramped. Hammocks sway above crates, and the smell yeast, sweat. Bilge water turns your stomach in a slow churn. Still, you say nothing. You've worked through worse back alley berths, breech deliveries in candlelit attics, screams muffled by shame and rags. This, you can endure. You find the corner meant for Liev. A mattress nailed to the floor, a bucket, a cracked basin with a chipped rosary looped through its handle, and your hands. That's what they need, your hands. Steady and sure, even when your soul is not. You set down your satchel and kneel to unlace your boots. The ship groans like a sick man turning in his sleep. You rise again, knees aching, and brace yourself as the vessel lurches into the channel. The wind sings through the rigging. Someone yells something crude in Portuguese. The boy laughs. You are no sailor. You know nothing of stars or rudders, but you know bodies. You know how they fail, how they survive, and when the moment comes, how they open, wide and terrible, to bring forth something new. For 3 days, you tend Liev. Her contractions begin faintly, then vanish. The rocking of the sea stills her like a lullaby, and she drifts in and out of fevered sleep, her hand sometimes seeking yours in the night. You press cool cloths to her head and hum old lullabies, ones your own mother sang while threading needles by candlelight. On the 4th day, you notice her feet begin to swell. You do not like the look of her urine. You say nothing to her husband. He's been topside since dawn, arguing with a red-faced man with gold teeth. The heat thickens. You pass the Canary Islands without seeing them. You ask no questions. You have not been paid yet. But it is on the 5th night, in a corridor near the stern, that you hear it for the first time, not a footstep or a rat, but a voice, a low chant, rhythmic, slow, too slow for work, too careful for prayer. You pause, you listen, then it's gone, swallowed by the slap of seawater and creak of timbers. You say nothing. Not yet. On the 6th morning, you're summoned to the captain's cabin. He is tall, waxy-skinned, with a cane made of what looks like ivory, though you dare not ask from where. He speaks to you in halting Flemish, offers you a wedge of orange you decline, and explains that they will be making a brief stop along the West African coast. He does not elaborate. He does not need to. You have heard stories. By midday, you feel the shift. The air becomes denser, stiller. You hear shouting, ropes pulled, a commotion on the deck above. You leave Lee's side briefly and ascend the ladder to the main deck, where barrels are being rolled and crates offloaded and then reloaded. But these crates breathe. These crates cry. You are no child. You are no fool. You turn away before you're seen. That evening, a sailor jokes too loudly at supper about the new cargo. He does not finish the sentence before the captain slams a cup against the table. The room goes quiet. Even the rats seem to still. Liev asks you later why your hands trembled as you folded her sheet. You do not answer. The sea is a wide, indifferent God. But you are beginning to understand that this ship is a temple built not of faith, but of profit and despair. The captain keeps the manifest locked in a desk beneath his cot. You catch a glimpse of it when summoned again to treat a sailor's broken hand. Inked names, dashes instead of surnames, a number, then another, then another. You avert your gaze. That night, Liev coughs blood into her pillow. You change the linens without speaking. Her husband has not been below in 2 days. You think, not for the first time, of abandoning the child to the sea once it's born, just slipping over the side with the infant swaddled in cloth. Before it can know this world, you do not sleep. The next morning, the chanting returns, this time louder, this time layered. Voices. Harmony. You follow the sound quietly, slowly along the narrow corridor behind the galley, past barrels of salt pork, past a mop left wet in a bucket. You pause at a vented hatch, press your ear against the wood, and hear it. A song, not in any tongue you know, but ancient, heavy, and strange, like stones grinding under water, like the sound of women mourning something that has not yet died. You flee back to Leave's side, but now the ship feels smaller, hotter, as if its ribs were shrinking inward, as if its bones knew what yours did not. On the 9th day, Leave screams, not from pain, but from fear. She swears she saw something at the edge of the corridor, watching. You say it was a shadow. You do not believe yourself. The crew grows quieter. The boy who led you below decks is nowhere to be seen. At dusk, you pass the galley and find the cook slicing plantains, sweat pooling at his temples. He whispers to you as you reach for the water bucket. They think it'll be tonight, he says, not looking at you. What will you ask? He doesn't answer. He just points toward the hold, where the crates breathe. You lie awake that night beside Leave's cot, listening to the boards groan, the wind slacken, and the voices now louder, urgent rise in cadence. You are only a midwife. You only meant to deliver a child. But the deck beneath you shivers, and somewhere in the dark, someone begins to sing again. But this time, the rhythm is not slow. This time, it builds. This time, it calls. It's the sound that pulls you upright, your spine pressed against the splintered oak planks of the cabin, the heat of the ship curling damp and salty against your cheeks, sticky and oppressive. You had been drifting in and out of something too thin to be called sleep. Your hand absently caressing Liev's forehead, tracing small circles over skin, feverish and slick, whispering assurances you can barely believe yourself. But now the voices below deck rise clearer, threading upward through the warped timbers like incense smoke in a cathedral, steady, insistent, full of a rhythm that quickens your pulse, a chant that thrums deep and ancient through the soles of your aching feet. Lieve moans softly beside you, fingers tightening reflexively around the hem of your apron, a desperate grasp that stirs you back to your senses. You lean closer, gently stroking her tangled hair, damp strands of chestnut twisted across her pale forehead, her breath coming in shallow gasps, lips forming whispered pleas for a relief that refuses to arrive. It's all right, you murmur, your voice softer than the night's faint breeze. But even as you say the words, the reassurance sounds thin, inadequate against the swelling tide of unrest pulsing beneath you. The discordant reality just beneath the veneer of calm you cling to desperately. You know very little about life aboard a merchantman, less still about what secrets its hull might harbor. But your instincts, honed through long, difficult nights in back streets and cellar rooms, tell you plainly that something is shifting, something inevitable, something that will fracture the fragile piece of this floating world you've found yourself on, adrift between continents, bound neither to past nor present. but somewhere precariously in between. Footsteps thunder across the deck overhead, quickening into panic as the crew stirs to action. Voices sharp-edged and urgent, words tumbling out in languages you cannot fully grasp, overlapping into a cacophony that heightens your unease. The distant clang of metal against metal punctuates the tension, a hollow sound that echoes through your bones, leaving you cold despite the relentless, humid heat. Liev's husband has not returned below deck for nearly 2 days now, and your concern grows sharper with every unanswered glance you cast toward the hatch above. The midwife's skill is in watching, listening, knowing precisely when to act and when to remain still. And though part of you yearns to step out into the corridor, to seek out answers to the unknown that now presses against you, the louder instinct holds you back. Stay here, it says clearly, like a mother's quiet wisdom. Wait, listen, and protect what you can. The chant beneath the decks grows louder, more rhythmic now, punctuated by moments of silence so absolute they ring in your ears. Each pause filled with the creaking protest of wood strained against the relentless ocean. You begin to imagine faces you have never seen, bodies chained and confined, breaths mingled and warm, rising like mist into the dense, foul air of confinement. And for a brief, horrifying instant, you wonder if those confined souls know your presence, if somehow they sense your quiet helplessness, your complicity in their unseen suffering. A sudden shout above snaps your thoughts back to your surroundings. Something crashes heavily against the deck, splintering wood and shattering silence. Live stirs uneasily, eyes flickering open with a startled panic. "What is happening?" she whispers, her voice strained, edged with a fear you have never heard before. "I don't know," you admit softly, carefully brushing a damp curl from her temple. "But you must stay calm. Breathe and think only of the child." She nods, though the reassurance is fleeting, lost quickly beneath another sharp cry. Closer now, this one distinctly human, filled with anguish. Your muscles tense involuntarily, the hairs along the back of your neck rising as if charged with static. Carefully, you ease yourself up, moving silently across the creaking floorboards, approaching the narrow opening in the door through which pale moonlight filters weakly, casting distorted shapes across the dim, cramped interior. Outside, in the corridor, the world shifts into chaos. Men rush past the narrow doorway, their eyes wide, faces contorted with fear, weapons gripped tightly in trembling hands, some with swords, others clutching tools hastily repurposed into makeshift defenses. One sailor stumbles against the wall opposite, clutching his side, blood darkening the fabric of his torn shirt. He looks up, briefly catching your eye through the sliver of space separating your worlds, his expression one of pure bewilderment and pain, before staggering onward, disappearing into the confusion. You press your palm firmly against your mouth to stifle a gasp, heart thudding painfully in your chest. Every instinct screams at you to run, to flee back to the dock you abandoned so hastily, but your feet remain stubbornly anchored to the swaying deck, held fast by something deeper than fear, something primal and unwavering. The need to protect the woman and unborn child who trust implicitly in your strength. "Behind you!" Liev groans again, louder, the sound more urgent. You hurry back to her side, kneeling, your fingers gently pressing against her swollen abdomen, feeling the tension ripple beneath your fingertips. Her face is contorted with pain now, eyes squeezed shut, breath shallow and ragged. It's coming, she gasps, fingers digging into your wrist with surprising strength. Now, the baby. You nod quickly, gripping her hand firmly. Your voice a steady, gentle anchor amid the rising chaos around you. Breathe. Leave. Deep and slow. Follow my rhythm. Yes. She nods weakly, her lips pale as she tries desperately to follow your guidance, chest rising and falling unevenly. You guide her carefully, coaxing her through each contraction, the cries from above deck growing more frantic, screams punctuating a battle you cannot see but can feel deeply in your bones. Another loud crash shakes the walls, nearly knocking you off balance, but you steady yourself, tightening your grip on Leave's hand, your voice unwavering in the darkness. Push now. Leave. It's time. She obeys, straining against the tide of pain, every muscle taut beneath your practiced touch. The ship sways violently again, as if caught in a fierce storm, throwing shadows across the cabin walls, distorting reality into something dreamlike and surreal. You hear a voice loud, commanding above the others, shouting orders in a language you cannot place. Then another voice, stronger still, in defiance, followed by a crash and silence. You look away from the door, back to Leave, who lies trembling, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Her breathing falters, and you press your palm reassuringly against her forehead. Just a little more, and you will hold your child, you promise softly, trying desperately to ignore the commotion growing ever nearer. One final, agonizing push, and the cabin fills with the thin, piercing cry of new life. Small lungs drawing breath for the first time, echoing defiantly above the chaos unfolding around you. You lift the infant carefully, quickly wiping away blood and fluid, wrapping it securely in a clean cloth, your fingers trembling with a mixture of relief and newfound terror. A daughter? You place her gently into Leave's arms, watching quietly as exhaustion gives way to awe, pain momentarily forgotten in the fierce, protective embrace of motherhood. She's beautiful, Leave whispers, tears mingling freely with sweat, her gaze locked on the tiny, wrinkled face of her daughter. But the peace lasts barely an instant. A violent crash sounds from just beyond the door, louder and closer than before. You whirl around, eyes wide, heart thundering, just as the door bursts inward, splintering wood scattering like straw across the floor. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted sharply against the pale glow of moonlight and chaos, is a figure unlike any you've ever seen. His frame is lean and strong, dark skin glistening in sweat, wrists marked deeply by raw iron chains, broken but still dangling. In his hand, a knife slick with blood, its edge trembling but steady, reflecting the scant moonlight like cold fire. He steps forward slowly, eyes wary, searching yours for something you cannot name. The infant wails sharply, piercingly loud, cutting through the night. The man pauses, eyes shifting from the knife to you, then to the newborn, confusion flickering briefly across his hardened expression. You stand frozen, the infant's cries echoing in the narrow cabin. Your breath caught painfully in your throat. No words come. Only silence. Only waiting. You had only boarded this ship to help bring life into the world, never imagining you might hold the fate of it in your own trembling hands. But now, standing in the shadow of uncertainty, surrounded by chaos and fear, one thing is clear. The world aboard De Zeven Huivelen has changed forever, and your only chance of survival lies not in weapons or strength, but in the trembling life bundled in Leave's exhausted arms, in the gentle courage that guides your voice, and the strange, uncertain bond now forged in the desperate silence that hangs heavy between you and the man holding the bloodied knife. The knife remains suspended in the dim light, its edge catching a thin sliver of reflection from the swinging lantern overhead. The man holding it does not speak, but his eyes, wide, tense, sharp with calculation, flick between your face and the baby. Then to Leave, who lies gasping and trembling, her blood pooling slowly beneath her hips. The infant continues to cry, tiny lungs heaving with the bewildered strength of one newly arrived in a world already on fire. For a long moment, no one moves, the ship itself holding its breath, creaking softly as if unsure whether to tilt toward mercy or violence. You do not reach for the child, nor do you shrink back. You keep your hands visible, palms open, steady as you were trained to be, even when faced with a mother bleeding too fast or a child emerging feet first into the cold unknown. You draw in one breath, then another, slowing your pulse deliberately, your voice a whisper that tries to borrow its tone from lullabies rather than reason. She is not yours to fear, you say, gently, gesturing to the baby, not with threat or demand, but something closer to reverence. She's only minutes old. Her world is no bigger than this room. His jaw clenches, but he doesn't lower the knife. Instead, he takes a single step forward, closer now, and you can see the wound's dried blood crusted at his temple, a ragged tear down his sleeve. The angry red swell of rope burns coiling around his wrists like cruel jewelry. His chest rises and falls with shallow breath, the kind of breathing you've seen in laboring women caught between exhaustion and panic, or soldiers moments after the killing is done. He does not speak your language. That much is clear, but he recognizes tone, cadence, fear, and perhaps he recognizes the one thing that remains unbroken between you, the child. You glance at Leave. Her eyes are glassy, her lips moving but silent, some prayer or plea barely escaping her throat. You touch her shoulder gently, then look back to the man. Slowly, painfully slowly, you kneel, one knee braced against the shifting floor, and press a hand over your heart. You hope it means something. You hope he sees it not as surrender, but as presence, as peace. A beat passes, another, and then, as suddenly as he came, he turns. Just one step backward, another. He vanishes into the corridor like a shadow sinking into the sea. The knife does not clatter. It disappears with him. You don't move for several seconds. Only the baby's thin cries reminding you that you are still here, still alive. Leave sobs quietly. Was he going to kill us? She asks, voice thick, almost childish in its tremble. You shake your head once. No, you answer, though you aren't sure it's true. But truth has become more elusive than it used to be, especially here, especially now. You turn your attention to her bleeding. The birth was difficult, and you knew even before the child emerged that she had torn. You work quickly, fingers deft even as the ship rocks gently beneath you, sewing with thread you boiled days ago, back when the worst danger you imagined was a breech birth or a fever too strong to break. Leave winces, clutches the blanket more tightly around the baby. Her breath's shallow. You do not tell her how much blood she's lost, You do not speak of mortality, or time, or how unforgiving the ocean can be to those who falter. Once you've done all you can, you settle back on your heels and draw in a long breath through your nose. The scent of copper is thick now, mingled with sweat and seawater and old oil. Somewhere above, voices shout again, different now, urgent, frightened. The revolt, it seems, is not yet finished. You rise and press your ear to the doorframe. The ship has grown louder. Boots stampede above, heavy and chaotic, interrupted by screams that swell and fade like waves. Someone yells in Dutch, another replies in Portuguese. You recognize none of the words, but their tone is unmistakable. The revolt is spreading. The deck is no longer theirs. Someone is winning. Someone is dying. You think of the man with the knife and the strange, unreadable look in his eyes as he met yours. Not rage, exactly. Not vengeance. Something closer to decision. Calculation. You wonder what he saw in you. What stayed his hand? A sudden knocking, sharp and insistent, shatters your thoughts. Not the crash of force, but a deliberate rhythm. Knuckles against wood in a series of 3. Then silence. Then 3 more. You move toward it slowly, pressing your palm flat against the wooden surface. Who is it you whisper, knowing full well you may not be understood? A pause. Then, a voice quiet, low, accented, speaking halting Flemish. Open. Please. No harm. Baby safe. It's not the same man. This voice is older, worn. You hesitate only a second before unlatching the door, just enough to peer through. The man on the other side is tall, shoulders sloped, beard flecked with salt and sweat. He wears what once may have been a ship's uniform, now ragged, torn open at the collar, blood staining one sleeve. He sees your face and the child behind you and nods solemnly. You. Help. Life. We. Protect you. You open the door fully now, staring up into his eyes, dark, tired, but resolute. Behind him, 2 others wait. One has a musket slung across his back. The other carries a hatchet stained dark. None raise their weapons. All their gazes are fixed on the child. We not kill all. The man continues slowly, struggling for words. Some cruel, not all. But now this ship, ours, you swallow. What do you want from us? He shakes his head. Nothing. Just baby cry. Loud. Maybe others come. Danger. He points down the corridor. Not toward the deck above, but deeper into the ship toward the rear, where the officers' quarters used to be. Safe room, he says. More women. Hurt. You. Healer. You glance at Leave. She nods weakly, clutching her daughter to her chest. Her lips part as if to speak, but only air escapes. Her strength is gone. You kneel by her, help adjust her shawl, bundle the child closer, then rise again. I am a midwife, you say, and I will come, but she stays here. The baby must stay quiet. The man nods once. 1 guard. Here. Good man. You hesitate, then step into the corridor. The heat is worse out here. The air smells of fire and blood and the acrid stench of fear. One of the sailors, no, not sailors now, not anymore, falls in beside you. He is young, no older than 20, barefoot and silent. He carries a broken oar like a club, its edge blackened with ash. You pass through a corridor where lanterns hang dead and ropes sway like nooses. Through cracked doors, you glimpse the aftermath, 2 men slumped over a barrel, eyes open and still. A smear of red leads toward the stairs. You avert your gaze. At last, you reach what was once the officer's galley. The door has been splintered open. Inside, 2 women lie on makeshift cots. One clutches her thigh, blood soaked through the linen. The other breathes shallowly, eyes closed, her shirt stained dark beneath her ribs. Another woman sits between them, cradling a water flask, whispering something in a tongue you do not know. You move without thinking, without permission. Your hands take over. The wounded woman's pulse is weak but steady. You rip linen into strips, boil water, cleanse the wound with salted cloth. You do not flinch when she screams. You cradle her head and whisper nothing words, old Flemish lullabies, nursery rhymes you haven't sung in years. No one interrupts. They watch you, silent, the way some villagers used to watch when you saved a child who should not have lived. One man kneels beside you and murmurs, "You save many." You do not answer. You do not need to. Hours pass, or perhaps only minutes. It is impossible to tell. Time has unraveled. The ship tilts again slightly, a reminder that you are adrift, somewhere between lands, between fates. When you return to Leave's cabin, the baby is asleep, curled against her mother's chest like a question without an answer. The man standing watch nods silently at your approach. His weapon remains at his side. You collapse beside them, the exhaustion pouring through you like hot wax. And as you lower your head onto the wooden boards, you begin to cry, not loudly, not violently, but slow and steady, like rain through an open window. The child stirs, and you reach for her hand. So small, so warm, so new. And you wonder, not for the first time, whether this small, howling life might be the only compass you have left in a world spinning wildly off course. The 4th morning, if it is morning at all, arrives not with sunlight, but with a strange, pervasive quiet that seeps into the bones of the ship like fog. It blankets everything in a muffled calm, deceptive and uneasy, as though the vessel itself has paused in recognition of what has occurred within its hull. The cries and chaos of the revolt have ceased, leaving behind only the slow creak of timbers and the occasional distant cough, or the faint drip of water from some fractured barrel hidden below. You open your eyes slowly, your body leaden, your neck aching from having slept upright against the bulkhead. Your arms curled protectively around Leave and the child, both somehow still breathing, somehow untouched in a world that has torn itself open like an infected wound. There's a new smell in the air now, not just blood and sweat, but smoke, acrid and unsettling, threading its way beneath the door like the long fingers of some unseen threat. You lift yourself slowly, your back sore, legs stiff. The man standing watch by the door, his name still unknown, nods once, wordlessly, then turns his head toward the corridor beyond. "They burn it," he says, the words thick, the accent unfamiliar but intelligible. "Dead ones. Burn fast. Too many." You do not ask who gave the order. You do not ask how many lay dead. You simply nod, your lips dry, your throat swollen with thirst. The baby stirs, then cries a thin, hoarse whimper, more pitiful than defiant, and Liev groans faintly, one arm reaching to cradle her daughter closer. Her skin is pale and clammy. You press the back of your hand to her brow, already knowing what you will find: fever, the price of torn flesh and salt air, of blood lost and rest denied. I need clean water, you say, your voice hoarse, eyes fixed on the man, and cloth, and food. He nods again, disappearing without a word, and you return to your patient, coaxing her into small sips from the canteen left by the makeshift guard. She swallows with difficulty, blinking slowly, eyes too dim. Her strength is ebbing, drifting outward like seawater sucked back from the shore before a coming wave. "Is it over?" she asks, lips barely moving. You hesitate. What does over mean? In a place like this, the captain is surely dead, though you have seen no body. The crew has been decimated, the ship half silent, the sails limp. But over no. You shake your head once, slowly. "Not yet," you say. But for now, it is still. Liev closes her eyes. She cried all night. She murmurs, fingers grazing the baby's brow. I think she knows. You do not ask what she means. There is a strange kind of wisdom in newborns. Some say a memory of the before life, of the womb, or perhaps something older still. You've seen infants born during storms or famine look out with eyes too knowing, too deep. This one, you fear, will carry something dark in her bones, not a curse, but a history branded not on flesh, but on breath. A shadow crosses the threshold, and you turn to see the older man from before shoulders slumped, blood crusted along the hem of his shirt, holding a bowl of water, 2 torn linen scraps, and a heel of bread. For her, he says, nodding to Liev, and you, too. You thank him quietly, taking the bowl and cloths. The bread is stale but softens when soaked in water. Liev eats it slowly, each chew a labor, while you dampen a cloth and begin to clean her wounds again, rechecking the stitches, pressing gently to test for pus or spreading heat. She winces but doesn't cry out. Pain, it seems, has become so constant that it no longer demands her attention. "I was a father," the man says suddenly, his voice lower now, more distant. 3 sons, taken. Me too. But I live. I work ships. He gestures vaguely toward the walls around you. Long time now. You pause, meeting his eyes. There is a depth there you hadn't noticed before. A grief so vast, it has receded into the quiet dignity of routine. Like scars long since faded, but not forgotten. "I'm sorry," you say, not because it's enough, but because there's nothing else to offer. He shrugs. No sorry left. Only today. This ship now. No master. Maybe we sail. Maybe we sink. I do not know. He sets the bowl down gently beside you, his fingers lingering for a moment near the rim, then leaves without another word. You wipe the baby's face next, clearing dried milk and sweat, noting the slight yellow tinge at the edges of her eyes. Jaundice, perhaps common enough and usually harmless, but here, on a ship without medicine, without shade or soft linens or quiet rest, it could mean more. Still, she nurses when Liev offers the breast, her latch strong. That alone is worth hope. Later, you step into the corridor. The smoke smell is stronger here, clinging to the walls. You pass 2 sailors, no, Not sailors anymore. Not prisoners either. Survivors. One carries a shovel, the other an axe. But neither looks at you with suspicion. If anything, they nod respectfully, as if your work is understood now. As if bringing life into this half-dead place has earned you a space no one dares challenge. You follow the narrow corridor toward the stern, where the infirmary used to be. There, amid broken shelves and splintered crates, you find bandages, more thread, a half-empty jar of honey sealed with wax, likely part of the captain's private store. You take it. You take all of it. Mercy does not wait for permission. As you turn to leave, you hear a noise, a low grunt, followed by labored breathing. Behind a fallen cupboard, someone moves. You step forward slowly, cautiously, fingers wrapped around the edge of a splintered door. And there, barely visible in the flickering light of a dying lantern, lies a man, one eye swollen shut, blood crusted across his jaw, his coat torn, insignia slashed through with a blade. You recognize him, the Dutch first mate, Van Rijk. You think his name was... He had been the one to argue against letting you board with Liev, something about women bringing bad luck at sea. He sees you, his good eye widens. He rasps. You do not speak. Help me, he says, coughing wetly. Please. You look down at him, then at the supplies in your arms. The honey, the linen, the life-saving tools you gathered for women who bled quietly, without title or rank. Van Rijk struggles to rise. Failing, he reaches toward you with a trembling, bloodied hand. I tried to stop it. He whispers, the revolt, the chains. I tried. You kneel beside him. His breath smells of rot and wine. Did you ask, voice flat, or did you just speak a little softer when they cried? He closes his eye. I didn't whip them, he says. You do not answer. Instead, you tear a piece of cloth, soak it with water, and press it gently against the wound on his chest. His skin flinches beneath your touch, as if surprised by kindness. You say nothing. You clean him. You do not offer the honey. When you return to leave, the light has changed. The world outside has tilted toward evening, though you see no sun, only the faint shift in hue through the cracks in the ceiling planks. The ship has slowed, or perhaps simply stopped. The sails no longer creak. The wind is gone. You settle beside her again, placing the supplies in a neat line, measuring what little you have left. The baby sleeps soundly now, breath soft and steady, her fingers curled around a scrap of linen like a flag. You stroke her hair gently, then glance up as someone approaches the doorway. It's the man from before, the one who first found you. He steps into the room carefully, holding something wrapped in canvas. He kneels and unwraps it slowly, revealing a map creased, water-stained, and partially torn, but still legible. He spreads it on the floor between you, pointing. Curaçao, he says, still far, but maybe no, go there. You look at the map. Dozens of tiny islands, each a name unfamiliar to your tongue. Some Spanish, some Dutch, some erased. You trace your finger across the archipelago, trying to understand what he wants you to see. We go here, he says, tapping a dot. No people, but food, fresh water. You nod slowly. What will you do with this ship? He shrugs. Keep it. If she float, silence settles between you. You stay, he asks. With baby. You glance at Laive, whose eyes are now closed, her breathing shallow but even. Her daughter stirs again, but does not wake. I stay, you say quietly, but she cannot travel far. We carry her, all of us. It is not a question. It is a promise. By the time you awaken again, the lantern has burned out, leaving only the faint, uncertain glow of moonlight that trickles down through the cracks in the ceiling planks, silvering the rough boards with a sheen that is less comforting than it is surreal. The ship has become a strange, disjointed place in the hours since the revolt half ruined and strangely quiet, suspended in a kind of limbo between storm and silence, authority and freedom, fear and fragile order. There is no captain anymore, no charts being followed, no shouted commands from the quarterdeck or bells marking time. Instead, the vessel now drifts beneath the constellations, crewed by survivors and former captives, adrift in both ocean and purpose, as if the world beyond its hull has become a rumor you can no longer quite believe in. You rise carefully, every joint stiff from the night's vigil. Beside you, Liv stirs faintly, but does not wake. Her skin remains too hot beneath your hand, her brow furrowed in the fevered half-sleep of exhaustion, and though she still breathes evenly for now, you can see the shadow of her struggle beginning to deepen, each inhalation shallow, her color too pale beneath the sheen of sweat. You adjust the cloth on her forehead, then check the baby, who lies wrapped in a swaddle of damp linens at her mother's side, her small mouth twitching slightly as if chasing a dream she will never remember. Her skin, too, is warmer than before, and though she feeds when roused, the milk she receives is thin, barely enough to sustain her. You recognize the signs, the grim progression you've seen more times than you care to count. Without nourishment, without medicine, without rest, they may not survive another day. You step into the corridor outside the cabin, where the air is heavy with the scent of ash and sea brine. Somewhere below, wood groans as if in protest, and the ship tilts just slightly to starboard, nudging your balance. The man who had stood watch earlier is gone, replaced now by a different figure, shorter, more muscular, his expression unreadable as he leans against the wall, sharpening a blade with slow, deliberate strokes. He looks up briefly as you approach, nods once, then returns to his task without speaking. You do not ask his name. The men aboard now seem to operate without need for introductions. Purpose defines them more clearly than titles ever could. You make your way toward the galley, though it is not hunger that drives you, but the hope that something, anything, might remain that could help leave. The galley itself is a ruin of broken crockery, overturned barrels, and the stench of spoiled meat. One of the men is attempting to clean it, scrubbing the floor with salt water and a strip of sailcloth, humming softly in a language you cannot place. You nod to him in passing and dig through the remaining crates, uncovering a few hard biscuits, a pouch of rice, several shriveled onions, and to your astonishment, a sealed jar of ginger root. You pocket the jar, knowing ginger's warmth may yet coax some strength into Liva's failing body, and carry the rest in the folds of your apron. Outside, the sea has calmed to a vast, oily stillness, stretching in all directions with the kind of silence that presses on the mind like too tight cloth. It is a silence that does not soothe, but rather unsettles, a silence that feels full of things unsaid. The sails hang limp above the deck, the rigging drooping like unbraided hair, and the air holds a weight that feels less like calm and more like anticipation, like something is watching from just beyond the edge of the horizon. You climb the ladder to the main deck for the first time since the revolt began. The sun hangs low behind a shroud of clouds, casting the world in a soft, gray light that bleaches the color from everything it touches. Around you, men move with quiet efficiency, cleaning blood from the railings, mending torn rigging, dragging the bodies of the dead to the port side, where a pyre has been hastily constructed atop an overturned longboat. There are no prayers spoken, no rites performed. The dead are lifted, wrapped in sheets where possible, and laid side by side like kindling. You watch as one man, older and stooped, takes a torch from a barrel of pitch and lights the edge of the pile. The fire catches quickly, the sailcloth and tar-stained wood igniting with a sudden roar that makes several of the onlookers flinch. The wind carries the smell away from the deck, but you taste the bitterness of it anyway. Flesh and salt and smoke, mingled into one acrid perfume that clings to your throat long after the flames have begun to settle. One of the former slaves stands near you, tall, thin, with scars around his ankles where shackles must have once bit deep. He watches the fire without blinking, arms folded over his chest. You glance at him, unsure whether to speak, but he beats you to it. "Too many to bury," he says, his voice soft but sure. "Too far from land. The sea won't take them right now, so we give them flame." You nod slowly. "Will you say something?" He shakes his head. "They know. Those who died. They know already." You leave the deck soon after, the fire still crackling behind you, and return to Lee's side. She's awake now, eyes glassy but alert, and the baby stirs restlessly at her chest. You crush a bit of ginger into warm water and coax her to drink. She grimaces at the taste, but does not refuse it. You wrap the child in a fresh cloth, tucking the edges tightly, trying to give her the illusion of safety, of comfort, of anything other than what the ship has become. Later, you are called again, not by name, for no one uses names anymore, but by a hand at your shoulder, a gesture, a look. They lead you toward the stern, to what remains of the chart room, where a meeting is being held. A small group has gathered 6 men and 1 woman, all with expressions carved from exhaustion and uncertainty. At their center stands the man who first found you, the one with the map. He gestures for you to enter, then points to a corner of the room where a broken table has been repurposed as a makeshift map desk. "We near an island," he says, "unmarked. No name. But I saw it, years ago. Small, green, some goats. I think. No flags. We need land." You step closer, eyes scanning the torn map. His finger rests on a space between the Lesser Antilles near a cluster of tiny specks that resemble nothing more than ink stains. "We go tomorrow," he says. "Row if no wind. Anchor if we can. We need food. We need time." You look up, and after? He shrugs. "Don't know. But on land, maybe. We choose again." A silence falls. The woman beside you speaks, her voice accented, but crisp. "There's talk among the crew," she says. "Some want revenge. Some want peace. Some want to turn the ship around, head for Africa. Others want to stay free, out here. And you ask. She meets your gaze, calm and unwavering. I want to live. I want the child to live. The man nods, then turns to you. You come with us tomorrow, to the island. You know sickness. You know birth. We may need both. You agree. Not because you have answers, or hope, or any clear sense of what the future holds, but because here, on this broken ship, you have become more than a witness. You are needed. And being needed is a kind of anchor in itself. That night, the stars emerge again dimmed by cloud, but visible enough to remind you that the world remains vast, spinning, unknowable. You lie beside Liev, whose fever has not broken, but whose sleep is deeper now, more peaceful. The baby sleeps as well, curled between the two of you, her breath warm against your arm. And as you drift towards sleep, you hear again the faint echoes of the chants from the hold, not loud, not forceful, but rhythmic, rising gently like a tide. This time, there is no fear in the sound, only memory, only sorrow, and somewhere, perhaps, something like beginning. Morning does not arrive with any clarity. Instead, it bleeds slowly into the damp, heavy air like a lantern behind a shroud of sailcloth. No dramatic burst of light, no herald of warmth or renewal, but rather a gradual easing of darkness into something merely gray. The heat has returned in earnest, sticky and breathless, thick enough to coat your skin in a film of sweat before you've even risen fully from the wooden deck. Around you, the ship exhales in small creaks and sighs, like a weary animal slowly stirring itself to movement after too many nights wounded and still. Liev sleeps fitfully, her fever hovering just below crisis. The ginger tea helped her through the night, though you know that, without rest, food, and time-precious commodities aboard a crippled vessel, she may not fully recover. Her breath rattles slightly when she exhales, not enough to frighten you into panic, but enough to mark the slow encroachment of illness. The child at her breast has stopped crying for long stretches now, not from peace, but from weakness. And though she suckles when prompted, it is with the mechanical exhaustion of a creature simply going through the motions of survival. You rise carefully, stretch your spine until it pops like a dry rope pulled too tight, and step into the corridor with the quiet resignation of someone long past, hoping for miracles. The hallway is empty, save for a few scattered buckets collecting condensation, and you make your way aft, barefoot now, your boots discarded hours ago in favor of quiet and traction. You are summoned by no one, but your presence is expected. That is the strange rhythm the ship has adopted now, a flow without command, without schedule, without hierarchy. People move when they must, speak only when needed, and vanish without explanation. It is not harmony, not exactly, but it is something near it, a kind of fragile understanding forged by desperation. When you reach the deck, the sky is slate-colored and full of weight, the kind of sky that threatens storm but holds back just enough to keep everyone guessing. Several of the former captives, now crew members by necessity or perhaps by default, are gathered near the bow, where two boats have been lowered and tethered to the side, bobbing gently in the water. The large ship cannot approach the island directly, not with its damaged rudder and unpredictable draft. Instead, landing parties will be sent, 2 at a time, rowed by hand to the shore where the promise of fresh water and vegetation waits like a mirage. You see the island now, visible in the distance for the first time, small, green, humped like the back of some ancient sea creature just surfacing after centuries asleep. No smoke, no structures, just a cluster of palms, a glint of rock, and the faint sound imagined or real of birdsong drifting across the waves. The man with the map, the one whom everyone now defers to, whether by respect or absence of better options, sees you and approaches with quiet purpose. His shirt is damp at the collar, his hands calloused from work, his eyes bleary but focused. "You will come," he says without preamble. First boat, you, me, and 2 others. You open your mouth to protest not from fear, but from concern. Leave is still too weak to stand, let alone climb into a swaying rowboat, and the baby has not yet cried with the full strength of her lungs since the night of her birth. But before you can speak, he holds up a hand. We carry her. You hold the child. 2 strong men, gentle, no drop. Promise. It's not a question. It's a decision already made, and you feel a strange relief in that after days of reacting, of bracing for the next twist of fate. There is something almost luxurious about having a path already set before you, even if it leads into the unknown. Leave stirs as they lift her later that morning, 3 of them, working carefully in silence, wrapping her in a canvas sling and patting the corners with torn sailcloth. She groans faintly, but does not protest, her eyes fluttering open long enough to meet yours with a look of confused gratitude before closing again. You carry the baby against your chest, wrapped tightly in a wool shawl that still smells faintly of the port where you first boarded, so many lifetimes ago. The child is silent, her eyes wide and unblinking, her fingers curled into your blouse. The descent into the rowboat is slow and precarious. The rope ladder swings violently in the morning wind, and the sea below gapes like a patient, waiting maw. One of the men slips as he climbs down, nearly tumbling into the water, but rights himself with a bark of laughter. And soon you are all seated within the boat, oars poised, the island growing slowly larger with each heave of the oars. The ship behind you seems smaller now, less imposing than before. Without its sails or flags or master, it has become simply a carcass of wood and memory, a container for things lost and half-saved. The sea journey to the island takes longer than expected. The waves are lazy but wide, and each stroke of the oars feels like a negotiation with the ocean itself. You watch the water slip past, dark and iridescent, full of things unseen. Occasionally, something flickers beneath the surface, a fish, perhaps, or a shadow. You do not ask what it is. You hold the baby close, whispering old lullabies beneath your breath, songs your grandmother sang to you during long winters, when the wind rattled the shutters and the fire shrank low. The baby does not cry, but her small body shifts against yours, pressing into your heartbeat as if it is the only sound she trusts. The island reveals itself slowly. First, the trees' tall palms bent in the wind, then the narrow strip of beach cluttered with driftwood, then a rise of stone where goats really do graze, just as the man had promised. No signs of habitation, no boats, no smoke, just earth and air and something close to silence. When the boat grinds softly against the sand, you are the last to disembark. The others move quickly, lifting leave between them like a fragile relic. carrying her carefully across the beach toward a shaded patch near the tree line, where ferns grow thick and the sound of trickling water hints at a stream nearby. You follow slowly, your legs unsteady, the child still clutched tightly against your chest. They set her down on a mat of woven palm leaves. Someone brings water in a carved gourd. Another begins gathering fruit small, knobby things with yellow skin and tart juice that stings your cracked lips. You find a rock and sit. Your knees ache. Your back feels brittle. But for the first time in days, the air feels breathable. There is no smoke, no fire, no chains or screaming or blood on the walls. Just the breath of the trees, the chirp of unseen birds, the sound of wind threading through fronds. Liv opens her eyes fully for the first time since yesterday. She blinks, looks around, then up at the canopy of green overhead. "Are we dead?" she asks softly. "No," you say, and smile. "But maybe we've left the world behind." That afternoon, others arrive, another boatload of survivors. Among them are 2 wounded men. A boy barely 16 with a gash across his forehead, and a woman missing 2 fingers on her right hand. They bring more supplies, dried meat, 2 kettles, a hatchet. The island begins to shift from destination to settlement, a fragile sanctuary carved from the sea. Fires are built. Shelters are erected from driftwood and sailcloth, and small paths are trampled into the underbrush. You gather herbs near the stream, bitter roots for fever, leaves with antiseptic oils, bark that can be boiled into a tonic. You mash them with a stone, mix them with honey, and coax them into Liv's mouth. She grimaces, gags, but swallows. The baby suckles again, this time with more vigor. As dusk falls, the men and women gather near the largest fire. They sit in a circle, sharing bread, water, silence. The man with the map speaks again, not loudly, but clearly. He names no leaders, draws no boundaries. He speaks only of survival, of days ahead, of ships that may pass or storms that may rise. He says there is no plan but to live, and perhaps to keep living long enough to decide what life should mean. Later, as the stars bloom above you like 1,000 silent lanterns, Liv sleeps beside you, her fever eased, her breath deep and calm. The baby curls between you, tiny hands twitching. You stare up into the canopy, the firelight flickering across the leaves, and wonder what stories you would tell of this if anyone ever asked. But no one will, because you are not a heroine. You are not a captain, nor a queen, nor a warrior carved in marble or ink. You are a midwife. You boarded a ship to bring a child into the world, and somehow, against everything the sea threw against you, you have done exactly that. The island, unnamed and unclaimed on any chart you've ever seen, becomes a strange kind of breathing thing over the days that follow, not a place of rest. Exactly, but a space carved between one life and the next, a liminal ground suspended between violence and recovery, between survival and something softer, something close to dignity. Each morning you wake before the sun, the sky still dim and violet overhead, dew clinging to the woven mats and the exposed roots that snake through the shaded forest floor. The fire from the night before has faded to smoldering embers, its warmth barely lingering, and the silence at this hour is so complete that your own heartbeat feels intrusive. You begin each day by tending to Liv, who is, against your earlier fears, beginning to heal. Her skin has regained some of its color. Her fever has broken. And though her legs are still too weak to carry her far, she now sits upright, leaning against the trunk of a palm tree with the baby nestled against her chest, like a secret she means to protect with every last breath. You check her stitches, clean the wound with the bitter poultice you brew daily from the bark and resin of a native tree, and coax her into drinking from the coconut water gathered by the others. She speaks rarely, but when she does, her voice is clearer, less strained. Yesterday, she asked if the ship was still visible. When you told her yes, she turned her face toward the sea and closed her eyes. "I hope it sinks," she said, not with anger, but with an exhausted kind of mercy. The others, those who now share this fragile refuge with you, have begun to fall into a rhythm, one that does not require spoken instruction. In the mornings, the stronger men and women set off into the jungle to gather food, returning with handfuls of guava, tamarind pods, and occasionally fish trapped in hand-woven nets laid in the shallows near the southern edge of the cove. Those who remain at the beach tend the fires, boil water, and care for the injured, of whom there are still many. You help where you can. You rebandage a man's broken arm. You wash blood from a woman's scalp and plait her hair to keep it out of the wound. You do not ask their names. They do not ask yours. There is a quiet understanding now that names, in this place, matter less than actions. One afternoon, you are summoned to a meeting by the fire, a loose circle of survivors sitting cross-legged in the sand, the man with the map again acting as a sort of anchor. He does not call himself a leader. He does not give orders. But when he speaks, others listen, and so do you. He points to the horizon, where a dark line splits the sea clouds. Maybe, or smoke. We must decide, he says simply. If another ship comes, what then? Do we hide? Do we raise flags? Do we trade our silence for rescue, or risk the chains again? A silence falls over the group, heavier than any storm. You look around and see in their faces the same question that has begun to roost inside your own chest. What is freedom, when the world beyond this island offers so many cages dressed in different colors? One woman, older than the rest and marked by a long scar across her collarbone, finally speaks. The sea has taken my name, my children, my country. I don't want it to take this, too. She gestures to the fire, to the rough shelters, to the tiny baby now sleeping in a sling against Leaf's chest. Here, we choose. Out there, we beg. Someone else nods. Another murmurs agreement. A third mutters something bitter about Portuguese flags and sugar islands. A young man spits into the sand and says nothing. The man with the map folds his hands together. We watch the sky, he says. We watch the sea. But for now, we stay. That night, you walk the edge of the island alone, tracing a narrow path where the sand gives way to rock, and the surf breaks in slow, lapping waves. The moon hangs low, bloated and golden, and the sea below it seems to drink its light. You pause at the high point of the cliff, gaze out across the water, and think of the voyage that brought you here, of the smell of blood and iron, of the knife in the corridor, of the moment you held a crying infant as the deck ran red and chaos bloomed like a wound. You think of the captain who never said your name and of the first mate, Van Rick, who begged for your help with blood in his mouth and lies on his tongue. You wonder if he survived. You wonder, faintly, if you hope he didn't. And then you think of the baby, whose name Liev has finally whispered to you, Annik. a name she once dreamed for a daughter she never thought she'd have. You say it aloud now, letting it roll across your tongue. Strange and soft and new. Anik, a name that belongs to no empire, a name untouched by chains or coin. In the days that follow, the work continues. A garden is started, small plots cleared with sharpened sticks and stones, seeds buried, watered, watched. Rain comes, sudden and hard, and turns the soil to soup, but also fills the barrels and hollows where water can be stored. Fish are smoked over open fires. Leaves are woven into baskets. Someone finds a wild chicken and cages it. Leave is able to walk again slowly, but steadily. You begin to dream less of blood. One evening, you are called once more not to the fire, but to the tree line, where a small group has gathered. They stand around something sprawled in the dirt. A man, barely breathing, skin blistered from the sun, lips cracked. He must have come from the sea. Perhaps he was clinging to wreckage. Perhaps he jumped ship in despair. No one knows. You push through the crowd and kneel beside him. His eyes flicker. He mutters in Dutch. You catch only fragments. Curaçao, wrecked, shores burning. You press water to his lips, but he is too weak to swallow. His breath comes in wet gasps. You recognize the sounds. You've heard them before. When breath begins to unravel, thread by thread. Still, you do what you can. You clean his face. You speak to him gently. You do not ask what ship he came from, or what price he paid for the journey. You sit with him as his breath slows, and you hold his hand when it stops. Later, you dig his grave near the grove of tamarind trees. No stone, no name, but you remember his voice, his final words, the memory of fire. It is nearly a week after your arrival when the baby Anik laughs for the first time. It is a high, startled sound, more gasp than giggle, but it is unmistakable. Leave cries. The others smile. You laugh too, not because it is funny, but because it is a sound that does not belong to sorrow. And that night, beneath the moonlight, you begin to sing, not softly, not privately, but aloud, in a voice clear enough for the palms to catch and carry down the hillside. It is a song your mother taught you, and her mother before her, something old and Flemish, full of boats and wind and the sea. Others join you. Some hum, some clap, some sway with their eyes closed. It is the first time music has returned to this place without fear. You realize, as your voice rises, that you are no longer waiting to be saved. You are no longer trying to return. You are simply living, and for now, that is enough. It has now been 12 days since the revolt, though no one marks time in any official way anymore. The hours and nights blend into one another like seawater into sky, with only the rhythms of survival, the gathering of food, the tending of wounds, the changing of tides to suggest the passage of time. And in the absence of clocks or calendars, you've come to measure the days by the weight of breath, the strength of Leave's voice, and the growing focus in Anik's gaze, which now locks onto yours with a kind of quiet scrutiny that feels almost ancient in its patience. The settlement, if it can be called that, has slowly transformed into something approaching permanence. Where once there were only tarps stretched between driftwood and palm trunks, there are now woven lean-tos, with floors cleared of rocks and swept of insects, fire pits lined with stones, and a communal space beneath a canopy of branches where people gather each evening to share whatever the island has yielded. The garden, patchy and irregular, has begun to sprout small green shoots, bitter roots mostly, and herbs that you've pressed into service as medicine or tea. The fruit trees deeper inland have been mapped, and paths to them marked with painted stones. You have not seen another ship. You have not heard another human voice beyond your island. And for now, that absence does not feel like danger. It feels like reprieve. Your days begin and end in motion. At dawn, you wake before the sun, rising with aching limbs and stiff joints from the packed sand bedding you've crafted beneath your shelter of stitched sailcloth and palm leaves. The air at that hour is dense with mist, and the island is still, save for the distant cry of a seabird or the soft rustle of a monkey moving through the trees. You begin by tending to the sick 3 now, 2 recovering from infected wounds, and 1 suffering from what you suspect is a fever born of tainted water. You grind roots with a stone mortar, boiling them into a pungent broth that turns the inside of your nostrils raw, but clears the sinuses and settles the stomach when consumed. You've used it on leave before, and it helped. Now it is the closest thing to a cure you can offer anyone. By midday, you are called to assist with the delivery of supplies hauled back from the jungle bundles of fruit, lashed together with vines, sacks of moss that retain water, and branches that can be stripped for cord. The heat, by then, is punishing, and your body is slick with sweat, the cotton of your shift clinging to you in damp folds. But there is no alternative. Everyone works. Even the wounded do what they can, fletching crude arrows, weaving traps, or mending nets. It is not a matter of pride or ego. It is necessity. And in necessity, there is a strange kind of equality. You speak to Leave often, now that her strength has returned enough for her to sit up, to eat without assistance, to speak more than a few words without becoming winded. She has begun to walk short distances, leaning on your arm or a branch you've fashioned into a cane. Her body is still soft and fragile from childbirth, but her spirit has hardened. You notice it in the way she observes the others, in the way she cradles Anik against her breast with a possessiveness that is not defensive, but purposeful. It is as though she has made a silent decision. Never again will she allow herself to be taken somewhere she did not choose. One afternoon, as you both sit beneath the shade of a wide-leafed tree near the edge of the settlement, Anik asleep in a sling across Leva's chest, she speaks to you in a voice low and reflective. "I used to dream of marrying a baker," she says, her eyes fixed on the horizon. A quiet life, warm flower and quiet mornings. I hated the sea, the smell of it, the way it took everything into itself and gave nothing back. You smile faintly, watching the waves, and yet it gave you this. Leave glances down at the baby, who murmurs in her sleep. She nods. It did, but not gently. You say nothing. Some truths do not require confirmation. They simply hang in the air, like smoke that refuses to dissipate. That evening, the man with the map, whose name you have since learned is Kofi, approaches you as the sun begins to bleed into the sea. His presence is never commanding, but always noticed. When he enters a space, others lean toward him slightly, as though drawn to some invisible warmth he carries. He is not loud. He rarely smiles. But he listens, and when he speaks, his words arrive like tools useful. deliberate, made for building. There will be a meeting tonight, he says. Not just stories, plans. You nod, understanding. The island has held you safely for nearly 2 weeks, but the question of permanence cannot be avoided forever. Supplies, while stable, are not infinite. The rainy season is approaching. The old merchantman anchored just offshore, though still upright, shows signs of decay, its sails fraying, its beams weathered from neglect and salt. When the meeting begins, it is beneath the central canopy, where torches made from twisted cloth and pitch-filled coconuts cast a flickering glow on the assembled faces. There are perhaps 40 of you now, some still bandaged, some scarred, all changed. Kofi stands at the center, not elevated, but simply present, and when he begins to speak, the silence that falls over the gathering is complete. We have lived, he says simply. That is no small thing. Heads nod. You feel your own spine straighten at the words. There is no poetry in them, but there is truth. Now we must choose what kind of life comes next. The ship can still be sailed, but not by many. The island can still be survived, but not without work. We cannot stay and wait. We cannot go without plan, so we choose. He pauses, then steps aside. A tall woman, Zelma, a former captive from the Sierra Leone coast who now helps lead the foraging efforts, steps forward. We propose this, she says. Half stay, half go. We refit the boat. We leave in 2 weeks. Those who stay fortify here, build better homes, farm, signal passing ships. Those who go search for a place not claimed by empire, or at least a place that does not demand our bodies in exchange for breath. The group murmurs. Some heads shake, others nod. A man speaks up in broken Dutch. He does not want to leave his brother behind. Another woman argues for full departure. A third proposes trading with pirates. You listen to all of it, sitting with Leave and the baby nestled between you, and feel a strange kind of calm settle over you. You are not a navigator. You are not a sailor. But you understand this kind of moment, this painful narrowing of choices into something that must resemble direction. When silence returns, Kofi looks toward you. It is not a demand, nor a challenge. It is an invitation. And you rise. I came on that ship, you say, pointing toward the distant hulk, now dark against the horizon. Not as crew, not as prisoner. I came as a midwife. I meant only to deliver a child. But this place, it has delivered something else. It has delivered us all. You pause, letting the crackling fire fill the space between sentences. I will stay, you continue. Because the child I delivered breathes here, because her mother walks again here, and because I have nothing behind me but names I do not wish to reclaim. Others murmur, you do not seek agreement, only acknowledgement, and in the flickering torchlight, you see it a dozen small nods, half a dozen more. Then, Zelma, with her scarred arms folded, says, then I will stay, too. The vote is taken not by ballot, but by movement. People step toward the side they choose. Kofi remains until the end, then walks to the center. Then it is settled. He says, 2 weeks. One party prepares the ship. One prepares the land. You do not sleep that night. Instead, you sit by the sea, listening to the tide pull and push, the way it always has, the way it always will. You think of the girl who boarded the merchantman out of Bruges, with calloused hands and a satchel of linens. A girl who thought her skill would be enough to keep her safe. That girl is gone now, but in her place is someone else. A woman who has delivered more than just a baby. A woman who has learned that sometimes survival is not enough, and that in the silence after the storm, you must decide not only how to live, but why. The morning after the meeting dawns heavy with mist, the entire island cloaked in a fog so thick it seems to muffle sound itself, rendering footsteps and whispers and even the call of distant gulls into ghost-like echoes. The canopy overhead weeps dew in steady droplets, pattering softly onto the sailcloth roofs and soaking the sand beneath your bare feet as you make your way toward the communal fires. The air tastes of wet ash and brine, and every breath you draw feels laden with memory of the night before, of the choice made not just by you, but by dozens of others who had, for so long, been denied the right to choose anything at all. You find Kofi near the shore, already ankle-deep in the surf, rolling up the sleeves of a frayed linen shirt as he oversees the small crew assigned to salvage the merchantmen. From this distance, the ship appears skeletal, its masts still upright but sagging slightly, like weary arms held aloft more out of habit than strength. The sails hang like wilted leaves, and the hull, once painted with a proud coat of merchant insignia, is now blistered and weather-stained, the sea having clawed away all pretense of ownership, stripped of its purpose, its nation, and its flag. The vessel resembles nothing so much as a relic abandoned and haunted, perhaps, but not yet without use. As you approach, Kofi greets you with a nod and a quiet murmur of your name, not loudly, not for show, but as a simple acknowledgement of your presence and your place here. It still surprises you how your name sounds in his mouth, not as something claimed, but returned, spoken gently, as though it belongs to you again. "We will begin with the hold," he tells you, gesturing toward a longboat lashed with bundles of rope, crude crowbars, and sail patches. There may still be stores worth salvaging, and tools. We need copper nails, anything that can be melted, repurposed. You hesitate briefly, eyeing the wreck. And what if the rats have claimed it all? Kofi's mouth lifts into the faintest smile. Then we bargain with the rats. By midday, you are inside the hull of the ship for the first time since the Revolt, and the memories strike you immediately not as images, but as sensations. The heat of the air, when the lower deck was sealed tight with bodies, the metallic tang of blood still wet between the boards, the distant echoing songs that rose through the beams in the night, like prayers sent upward from a forgotten underworld. The ghosts of those hours have not left. They linger in the stale air and the dark corners, and even the rats, as they scatter from overturned barrels, seem to carry a trace of those final screams in the twitch of their tails and the nervous skitter of their claws. You work quickly, your hands moving more by memory than sight, fingers tracing the edges of crates, testing the weight of sacks gone soft with mildew, inspecting every rusted hinge and broken blade for salvageable pieces. Others move beside you, equally silent, equally determined. There is no speaking down here. The space demands reverence, or at least quiet. And even the most boisterous of your companions seem to understand that this is not simply a wreck to be looted, it is a grave. And though the bodies have been removed, burned or buried or surrendered to the sea, their presence has not dissipated. It clings to the boards, to the walls, to the very air itself. You find remnants of things once meant for profit bolts of wool, now moth-eaten and stained, tobacco casks cracked open and long since emptied, bundles of iron chain, still coiled like sleeping snakes. One of the men finds a sealed crate marked with the Dutch East India insignia, and when pried open, it reveals a trove of small tools, hammers, chisels, needles, files. Nothing elegant, nothing luxurious, but useful, precious, even. You spend hours sorting through the wreckage, emerging only when the light outside dims enough to turn the deck a shade of bruised lavender. Your clothes are soaked with salt and dust. Your hands bear small cuts, but you carry a satchel full of nails, cloth, and a coil of copper wire that someone will surely find a use for. Back on shore, Liv greets you with a tired smile. Her skin is no longer fevered. She walks now without assistance, though her steps are measured, her breath short. Anik lies wrapped across her chest, sleeping soundly, her tiny fist curled around the edge of Liv's tunic. She barely cried today, Liv says as you sit beside her on the woven mat. Just once, when I stood too quickly. But otherwise, she's been watching the trees, the sky, like she's trying to remember something important. You smile faintly, tucking a damp curl behind your ear. Maybe she is. You share the salted fish they've prepared over the fire and chew dried guava, your teeth sticking slightly from the syrupy texture. Nearby, someone begins humming a tune, a low, steady rhythm carried by breath rather than voice. Others join in gradually, and by the time night has fully claimed the island, the beach is once again filled with the kind of music that lives beneath sorrow, not instead of it. No one dances, not yet, but they sway, they clap, they close their eyes and remember. That night, as you sit near the fire watching embers lift skyward like prayers too fragile to speak, a girl named Elia approaches you. She is young, perhaps 13 or 14, and has not spoken much since the revolt. Her mother was among the first to fall in the initial wave of violence, and she has spent the days since shadowing the foragers, collecting fruit and herbs in silence. She kneels beside you, her fingers twisting a thread of palm fiber into a bracelet. I heard you helped my mother once, she says softly, when she had fever, before we left the coast. You nod, surprised she remembers. Her mother had indeed come to you late one night during your brief stay in Elmina feverish, eyes wide with a delirium that turned speech into riddles. You'd given her vinegar-soaked cloths and a bitter brew of leaves crushed with ginger. She had improved, briefly. She said you had hands like cool rain. Elia says, not looking at you. She said you were the only one who touched her like she mattered. You do not trust your voice to reply. Instead, you place your hand gently over hers, and the two of you sit that way for some time, the sea sighing against the sand. When Elia finally rises and returns to her sleeping mat, you remain where you are, staring into the fire until your eyes blur. You think of all the women who have passed through your hands, some screaming, some silent, some clinging to life with desperate strength, others slipping away between breaths. You have always known that being a midwife means standing at the threshold between worlds. But only now do you understand how many thresholds there truly are between birth and death, between captivity and freedom, between memory and forgetting. In the days that follow, the preparation continues. Those who will depart aboard the ship begin testing the repaired sails, hammering planks into place, gathering barrels of water and baskets of dried food. They speak in low tones, making lists, measuring winds. Their faces are a mix of anticipation and dread. They do not know what lies ahead, only what they leave behind. You, on the other hand, begin helping to build something that will last. With others who have chosen to remain, you map the streams, collect stones for the foundation of a larger shelter, even begin carving rudimentary clay vessels to store oil, grain, and herbs. Liv works beside you when she can, cradling Anik in the crook of her arm, her voice stronger now, her steps steadier. There is talk of planting more food taro, sweet potatoes, even sugarcane if you can learn to cultivate it. Someone begins drafting symbols for marking paths. Another starts recording names of the dead, names of the living, names of those yet to arrive. One evening, as the sun sinks behind the trees, you find Kofi standing alone at the edge of the cove, staring out at the ship. His back is straight, his hands clasped behind him. "She'll float," he says without turning. "Not forever, but long enough." You nod. Long enough for what? He pauses, then looks at you. Long enough to try. You stand beside him for a while, saying nothing more. The sea is calm tonight, its surface glassy, reflecting the stars. And for the first time since you stepped aboard De Zevenheuvelen, you feel not safe, exactly, but grounded, as though your feet, which had drifted for so long through fear and salt and silence, have finally found soil. The ship sails at dawn, if what rises over the sea can still be called dawn. The sky is a bleeding canvas of low purple clouds and amber light, the sun crawling upward not with triumph but with caution, as if even the heavens hesitate to witness another departure. The surf is calm, barely more than a shiver on the ocean's skin, and the wind has returned just enough to swell the patched sails like lungs drawing a first breath. Those who have chosen to leave stand in quiet clusters along the shore, their satchels packed with dried fruit, salted fish, sealed jars of medicine, and pieces of the life they have lived here for these last strange, suspended weeks. They wear no uniforms, they carry no flags. What binds them now is not allegiance to a country or a cause, but to each other, and to the hope that somewhere beyond the horizon lies a place that might receive them without chains, without cruelty, without expectation of silence. You rise before the others that morning, not because you are eager, but because sleep has become a thin, uncertain visitor in recent nights, slipping away before the stars fade. Your dreams have grown heavier, visions of water rising through floorboards, of infants born with no mouths, of ships that sail endlessly in circles. You do not share these dreams with Laiv or the others. They are not prophecies, only memories twisted into symbols, your mind's way of stitching trauma into narrative. The air is wet with salt and anticipation as you step onto the beach, your sandals damp, your apron heavy with the day's tools, a knife dulled from stripping bark, a handful of dried basil leaves wrapped in cloth, a length of cord, and a carved wooden teether Anik has taken to chewing. The baby sleeps as you approach the gathering crowd, her breath soft against your neck, her small fist nestled against your collarbone like an anchor. Liv stands just ahead, her hand resting on the shoulder of a tall, quiet man named Thomas. who has volunteered to sail with the departing group. He will take with him a copy of the island's map, a basket of preserved herbs you helped prepare, and the names of every person who remains. He has promised, in his slow, deliberate voice, to speak of the island when he can, to tell its story not as a place of shipwreck or rebellion, but of renewal. You believe him not because he speaks often, but because when he does, it is never in haste. Kofi stands at the boat, giving instructions with the firm calm of someone who understands that orders mean little if not spoken with clarity. He speaks to each sailor, checks each rope, touches the tiller as though it is an extension of himself. When he turns and sees you, his expression softens not with sentimentality, but with recognition. He walks over, pausing only a few feet away. "You're sure you'll stay?" he says. It is not a challenge. It is a quiet repetition of a choice already made, a space offered for reversal that you both know you will not take. You nod. "I'm sure. I belong here now. There's still work to do." He looks past you to where Liev now rocks Anik slowly beneath the shade of the trees, and his eyes settle with a kind of gravity that seems to draw the whole morning inward. "That child," he murmurs. "She'll grow up with no country but the land under her feet. That might be the greatest freedom of all." You do not reply. There is nothing more to say. You clasp his hand briefly, a gesture both farewell and blessing, and step back as the first group begins boarding. The boat is not majestic. It is no longer even the Dezeven Huvelen in any meaningful way. Its name has been scraped from the hull, the figurehead removed and buried in a small ceremony by the children, who had insisted the angry angel be laid to rest. The ship is simply a vessel now reborn without label or legacy, reclaimed by those it once sought to destroy. As the tide lifts it slowly from the sand, a chorus rises from the beach. No words, just sound, a hum, then a chant. Voices layered together in a rhythm older than the voyage, older than the ocean. You join in without meaning to, your voice slipping into the current of song as naturally as breath. The sound carries across the water, following the boat as it drifts toward the horizon, its sails catching the sun. When it disappears from sight, the beach is quiet again, and the real work begins. With half your number gone, the island feels both emptier and more intimate. Every voice is heard more clearly. Every absence is noticed. But the work does not slow. If anything, it becomes more urgent. The knowledge that the island is no longer a waiting place but a home, perhaps a permanent one, settles over you like a second skin. You spend the first days after the departure strengthening the shelters. You learn to tie tighter knots, to stitch waterproof seams with palm fiber and fish gut. You help dig new irrigation trenches for the gardens, diverting water from the hillside stream into the lowest plots where yams have begun to thrive. You build a new storage hut from bamboo and stone, high enough to avoid the tide, sturdy enough to survive a storm. Every task is collaborative. No one gives orders. Everyone offers knowledge. In the afternoons, you teach the children letters, scratching symbols into the dirt with a stick, repeating sounds, naming things. You start with the basics. A is for anchor. B is for boat. C is for coconut. They laugh when you draw the letters wrong, and you let them correct you. Their giggles a kind of music that lingers in your ears long after the lesson ends. Liv becomes your partner in more than care. She helps with the sick, learns to measure herbs by sight and smell, memorizes which leaves reduce swelling and which cause nausea. She is not the same woman who stumbled onto the ship in Bruges, round-bellied and pale with fear. Her hands are stronger now, calloused. Her shoulders square. When Anik cries, she holds her with a firmness that says, "You are here. You are safe. You are mine." One night, a storm rolls in from the east. The wind arrives first, flattening the taller fronds, lifting the tarps. Then comes the rain, heavy, pounding, relentless. You lash your shelter shut, reinforce the supports, cradle Anik against your chest while Liev leans over a small flame to keep the tea from going out. Outside, the jungle howls, branches snap, water pours from the sky in thick curtains, but the structures hold. No one is lost. The next morning, trees are down, paths are washed away, but no lives have been taken. That, you all agree, is a victory. You helped bury a man that week, a quiet elder who had arrived days after the revolt, his body already weakened from hunger. You had treated him as best you could, but his lungs were too tired, and the fever too strong. The grave is dug beneath a tamarind tree. A girl places a bowl of fruit beside the mound. You speak a few words, not religious ones, just words of acknowledgement. Then you return to work. There is always more work, more plants to tend, more traps to set, more illnesses to treat. One child breaks a bone. You set it with bark and linen and murmur stories while the splint dries. Another develops a rash. You brew a tea of hibiscus and honey and soak cloths to cool her skin. You treat a woman with tooth pain by boiling clove in oil, and she weeps with relief when the ache fades. These things are small, but they matter. They mark the shape of life. Weeks pass, a moon cycle, then another. You keep a record in a journal now, scraps of parchment salvaged from the ship, bound with cord, ink made from soot and berry dye. You note births, deaths, recipes, treatments, names, dreams. You sketch the leaves of new plants, record the shapes of birds. You write down what Anik babbles in her sleep. One day, a boy runs from the southern cliff, shouting that a sail has been spotted. Everyone gathers. You climb to the ridge. Far on the horizon, a dot, a ship, not large, not fast. No flag visible. You do not light a fire. You do not raise a signal. You all simply watch. The ship passes. It never alters course. Perhaps they never saw you. Perhaps they did. You return to your work. That evening, as you sit with Liev near the water, Anik sleeping between you, you speak aloud what you've only whispered before. I think I'm not afraid anymore. Liev looks at you. Of what? You shrug, watching the tide. Of forgetting the world we came from. Of the sound of Dutch. Of Bruges. Of my mother's kitchen. Of all of it. She is quiet for a long time. Then she says, maybe we don't forget. Maybe we carry it with us. But softer. You nod. And as the stars bloom overhead, you think she is right. It is nearly the third full moon since the revolt, though few among you mark time in moons alone anymore. The island, once a temporary refuge, has begun to shape itself into something that feels increasingly like a village, not merely a camp clinging to survival, but a settlement with memory, rhythm, and intent. Shelters have been reinforced with clay and stone. Paths between the palm groves and the cove have been widened and lined with shell fragments. New gardens flourish in rows that curve along the slopes, carrying rainwater downward into neat troughs, while fishing lines stretch across the shallows like a spider's patient net. The sea no longer holds its earlier menace. It is still vast, still unknowable, still prone to storm. But now it lives in partnership with you, not opposition. Its tides are charted, its moods anticipated. Even its sounds, the endless lull and sigh of waves over coral and stone, have become part of your internal landscape, a metronome to which your days and nights are now attuned. In this new rhythm, your role has deepened. You are no longer only the midwife, the one summoned in moments of panic and pain, though that work continues. Now, your hands are called upon for other needs as well: the building of knowledge, the preservation of plant lore, the teaching of letters and anatomy to the children who cluster around your mat each afternoon with bare feet, dirt-streaked legs, and eyes bright with the hunger to name the world that has claimed them. What began as a handful of scratchy drawings in the sand, A for anchor, B for boat, has become a curriculum, passed from child to child, often retold by their parents who listen nearby while shelling beans or mending nets. You have begun recording these lessons on salvaged parchment, binding them between pieces of driftwood wrapped in palm fronds, creating what some have jokingly called your book of roots and ribs. It contains not just letters, but descriptions of plants with their uses, symptoms of fever and how to treat them, instructions for childbirth in both breech and normal positions, songs that calm infants, chants that mask labor pain, and even a few dreams, a record of things seen and felt and feared in the dark. Things that the children insist be written down so they will not be lost to forgetting. Liv has recovered more fully than you dared hope. Her gait, once cautious and unsteady, is now confident. Her voice, once hushed by fever and grief, has returned with warmth and strength. She has become your closest collaborator, learning each remedy you teach her with the eager diligence of a student and the fierce protectiveness of a mother who has known the cost of helplessness. Together, you care not just for the ill, but for the well, for the ones who do not yet know they will need you. You preserve herbs in oil, dry leaves in the sun, grind barks to powder, and pack poultices into clay jars with careful layers of linen and salt. Anik, now nearly 3 moons old, has grown into a quiet, curious infant who watches the world with solemn eyes and clutches at everything within reach: leaves, hair, fingers, your pendant, even her own feet when they stray too close to her face. Her laugh is rare but breathtaking, a sudden, involuntary music that causes even the grimmest workers to pause and smile. She has come to symbolize something none of you speak aloud: not hope, which feels too fragile a word, but continuity, the stubborn refusal of life to be snuffed out entirely, even after fire and blood and salt. One morning, as you gather water near the stream that snakes through the southern hills, you come across Aaliyah sitting quietly on a rock, her feet dangling into the current, her fingers twined with vines she appears to be braiding. The girl has changed, as all of you have. Her silence is deeper now, not wounded but thoughtful, and when she speaks, it is with a precision that belies her age. "I want to become like you," she says, not looking up from the vines. You crouch beside her, rinsing a jar in the cold water. "Like me in what way?" She lifts one shoulder, a subtle gesture. You remember things. You teach. You touch people when they are afraid, and they stop shaking. You consider this for a moment before answering. Those are things anyone can learn. But remembering, that's not always a gift. Sometimes it's a burden. Aaliyah shrugs again. Maybe, but forgetting is worse. You nod slowly, placing the rinse jar back into your basket. Then I'll teach you. And you do. Over the weeks that follow, she becomes your shadow, watching as you prepare tinctures, taking notes in the sand with a carved stick, sitting beside you as you examine bruises, fevers, bites, and burns. She is patient, meticulous, never squeamish. When a young boy arrives at your shelter crying from a gash on his foot, it is Alia who washes the wound, boils the cloth, and wraps it neatly while you whisper a story to distract him. That night, Leave tells you, she's the child of someone who wasn't given time to become old. She's decided she'll live for 2. You nod, or more. The island itself begins to change in subtle ways. Where once there were only shelters clustered along the beach, now there are new ones nestled deeper into the jungle, built on raised platforms, with walls woven from reeds and framed with branches that have been stripped, dried, and bent with steam. Smoke from cooking fires curls lazily upward through the canopy, and the smell of stew, fish, and roasted breadfruit lingers on the wind. Children's voices echo through the trees. Someone is carving flutes made from bone, drums stretched with hide. Another person paints, using crushed berries and soot to mark long planks of wood with shapes and symbols that no longer belong to any known flag or creed. There is talk, now, of choosing a new name for the island, one that is not borrowed from the maps of dead captains or scribbled in the logbooks of traders, a name no empire can claim, no merchant can brand. Suggestions are whispered during meals, tested in the mouths of children, etched into sand before being washed away, tried again. No consensus has been reached yet, and no one presses for it. The naming of a place, you've come to understand, must rise naturally from its soil, not be nailed to it like a claim. One humid afternoon, a shout echoes from the cliffs. You rush toward the sound, heart leaping with old panic, but it is not danger. It is wonder. A pod of whales has entered the bay, their bodies surfacing in long arcs, their spouts spraying plumes of mist into the air. The entire village gathers to watch, mouths agape, eyes wide. Some cry, others laugh. A few fall to their knees. The whales do not linger long. They circle once, then turn slowly, moving off into deeper water. But their appearance is treated as an omen, though of what no one agrees. Leave insists it means the island is being blessed. Kofi, watching quietly from the ridge, murmurs that perhaps it means nothing at all, and that in itself is worth noticing. You do not try to explain what you feel. You simply watch, the baby warm against your chest, your breath caught in your throat, your mind filled with the sound of water and air and motion so large it makes your ribs ache. That night, the drums return not in mourning, but in celebration. A feast is held with smoked fish, sweet cassava, and a rare chicken that had been caught, killed, and cooked by consensus. Stories are told, songs are improvised. Even Anik is passed from hand to hand like a living charm, her wrinkled forehead kissed again and again. Elia dances with the other children, her movements sharp, fluid, precise. Liv sits beside you, her fingers brushing yours as the fire crackles and the stars shimmer overhead. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asks, nodding toward the sea. You don't have to ask who she means the ones who sailed away. "Some will," you say. "If they survive, if they're allowed to, if they still believe in what we tried to build. And if they don't," you pause, "then we keep building anyway." Liv nods. "That's what I thought." The night deepens. A breeze stirs the trees. Somewhere in the jungle, a bird cries once, then falls silent. And in that stillness, as you watch the fire fade to embers and the people around you begin to drift toward sleep, you realize that this story, your story, has begun to extend beyond the limits of your own hands. The baby at your chest, the girl at your side, the medicine you've taught others to make, the songs that echo from the trees, they will all continue, even when your voice has stopped, even when your breath is spent. And this, you think, is not just survival. This is legacy. It is in the 4th month, though. By now, the notion of months feels like a relic of the world you left behind, that the balance of the island shifts once more. Not with violence, not with fire or screams or the clatter of chains, but with something subtler, something more unsettling in its quiet certainty, the arrival of strangers. It begins with a plume of smoke, faint but unmistakable, curling up into the sky from somewhere beyond the ridge that marks the island's eastern edge. At first, those who see it say nothing, chalking it up to a small forest fire, perhaps started by lightning or the sun magnified through dew on a glassy leaf. But when the smoke continues into the evening, steady and controlled, its shape too constant to be accidental, questions begin to ripple through the village. Who lit it and why? You are in the garden when the call goes out, crouched among the cassava plants with your hands buried in the soil, demonstrating to Elia and 2 younger children how to tell when the roots are ready to harvest by the tension in the stems. The moment the cry reaches you, smoke. From the ridge you stand, brushing soil from your palms, your heart dropping in the way it did during storms back on the ship, when every creak of the timbers might have meant the end. Within the hour, Kofi has gathered a scouting party. There are 7 of them, 3 who once served on merchant vessels, 2 who know how to track footprints in forest undergrowth, 1 who survived for a year alone in the Sierra Madre, and Kofi himself, who carries no weapon but walks as though he is one. You offer to go. You say it plainly, without pleading or bravado, simply as a fact. If there is danger, and someone is hurt, I can help. He regards you for a long moment, then nods. You come, but stay behind us. The walk to the ridge takes nearly an hour, the climb made more difficult by the wetness of the earth from the previous night's storm. You move in silence, the group coordinated by glances and gestures, not words. At one point, a broken branch is found where it should not be. Later, footprints are seen fresh, human, not belonging to anyone from the village. Your breath grows shallow, your palms damp. You feel the ache in your joints, the tension in your calves, but you do not stop. You do not speak. And then, as the trees begin to thin and the ridge comes into view, you hear it not voices, but the unmistakable crackle of firewood and the faint clang of metal against metal. The scent of cooked meat wafts toward you, smoky, seasoned. Whoever these people are, they are not hiding. They have built a camp, and they expect to be seen. You crouch behind a fallen log, peering through the leaves. The camp is small 4 tents, made of sailcloth and patched canvas. A makeshift fire pit has been ringed with stones. There are 6 people, 4 men, 2 women. Their clothes are European, but frayed and dirtied with sea salt and ash. One man wears a coat with gold embroidery, torn at the cuffs. Another has a rusted pistol tucked into his belt. They do not look like soldiers. They do not look like merchants. They look like survivors, much like yourselves. Kofi watches for several minutes, then stands slowly and steps into the clearing, his hands held open, palms up. You rise behind him, your heart pounding, your pulse in your ears. The others follow, fanning out slightly, weapons sheathed but visible. The strangers react with a mix of surprise and calculation. One of the women, dark-haired and sharp-eyed, reaches instinctively for the knife at her waist but does not draw it. The man in the embroidered coat steps forward. "We thought this island was empty," he says, his French-accented English smooth but wary. "Clearly, we were mistaken." "No one owns it," Kofi replies evenly, "but it's not empty." A long silence follows. You watch the stranger's eyes where they look, how their hands move. They are tense, but not hostile. They are hungry, but not desperate. One of them, a boy no older than 16, stares at you openly, eyes wide as if seeing a ghost. You realize, only then, what you must look like to them, a group of people in simple island garments, scarred and sun-darkened, standing with confidence, unity, and purpose, not lost, but home. Finally, the man in the coat sighs. "We were shipwrecked," he says. "A storm. The Étoile Blanche. We were 30. Now we are 6. We've had no food save what we could catch. No medicine. No tools. We found this place by accident. We didn't know anyone lived here." "No one did," Kofi says. "Not until recently." You step forward. "Is anyone among you injured sick?" The woman with the knife answers. "One of us. Fever. He hasn't stood in 3 days. Take me to him." She hesitates. You do not. You walk forward, and the others part for you. Inside one of the tents, lying on a blanket soaked through with sweat, is a man in his 40s. His skin is pale and waxy, his breath shallow. You kneel beside him, unwrapping your satchel. He opens his eyes once, sees you, and mutters something in Portuguese, something about the Virgin, about salvation. You do not correct him. You press a damp cloth to his brow, check his pulse, then call for water, honey, and bark. The strangers bring what they have. The rest you pull from your pouch. The others watch, uncertain, as you begin to work. By nightfall, the man's fever has broken. They give you half their food in thanks. When you return to the village with Kofi and the others, the conversation begins in earnest. What to do with them? Allow them to stay. Give them a section of land. Fold them into your people. There are arguments on both sides. They are sailors, one woman says. They could bring news, help us build a vessel. They are thieves, says another. They will take what we've made. But Liev, standing with Anik in her arms, says, they are us. Just 2 months behind. That settles it. The 6 are invited to join. Not as guests, not as dependents, but as contributors. They are told there are no masters here. no hierarchy. Every voice counts. Every hand works. They agree. And so the island changes again. The map is redrawn. Paths extended. A new shelter built beside the cassava grove. The newcomers learn your ways quickly. The woman with the knife, Jean, is skilled in sewing. The boy, Etienne, can climb trees like a monkey. The man with the coat, Mark, knows how to repair pulleys and rudders. They are not saints, but they are not enemies either. One evening, you sit with Jean as she patches a hole in a fishing net, her hands fast. Sure. This place, she says. It reminds me of a story my mother told about a village that was cursed because it forgot how to welcome strangers. When the gods came in disguise, the people turned them away, and so the gods took everything. You smile. We've already lost everything. There's nothing left to take. She shakes her head. You have more than you think. You fall silent. That night, you dream of the ship again, but this time, it is not on fire. It sails gently across calm waters. It sails full, its deck lined with faces you know and do not know. And at the helm, a child with eyes the color of the island's sky. Annick, you wake with tears on your cheeks. And for the first time in years, they are not tears of grief. They are tears of recognition. The days that follow the arrival of the 6 survivors from the Étoile Blanche pass not in upheaval, as many feared, but in a kind of cautious unfolding, as if the island itself were slowly exhaling after holding its breath. The newcomers, no longer merely visitors, but not yet fully villagers, begin to settle into the rhythm of the land with an awareness that is tentative, reverent, and tinged with awe. They move through the cleared pathways like guests in a sacred grove, always watching, always listening, always conscious that they are walking through a story that began before their arrival and will continue long after they are gone. It is Jean who first learns the route map, a system of knowledge carved not in stone or ink, but in practice, in footsteps and fibers and familiarity. She joins Liev and Ilya in the early mornings, watching closely as they gather herbs from beneath the trees whose leaves bend to the weight of the damp air. She learns to distinguish between similar-looking plants which leaf reduces fever when steeped and which one causes nausea if chewed, which bark numbs toothache, and which poisons if not stripped properly. She asks questions, not idly, but with hunger. She confesses, one evening by the fire, that back in Marseille, she never once learned to cook without salt, never held a blade with purpose beyond fish or thread, never needed to identify a tree by its scent. Now, she says, she dreams of roots and vines and the whisper of leaves against her shoulder in sleep. Etienne, the boy who first stared at you with eyes too old for his face, quickly becomes indispensable. His wiry frame and nimble limbs make him ideal for scaling the taller palms and creeping into narrow spaces in the rocks that house nests and fruits the others cannot reach. He spends his days climbing, exploring, and reporting back, mapping the topography of the island in a way no one else could. He builds crude traps out of twisted branches and fish gut, testing them in silence, refining them without comment, and one day returns with 3 rabbits and a sack of snails. He lays them at your feet and asks, with a solemnity that feels ceremonial, "Will you show me how to make the broth for the sick ones you do?" Mark, the man with the tattered coat and the rusted pistol, proves more complicated. His knowledge is useful, there is no denying that. He understands levers and rigging, the art of balance in ship's holds, and how to lash beams together in such a way that they flex with the wind rather than against it. He repairs pulleys, reinforces shelter supports, and even helps improve the barrels used for storing water by charring the insides to prevent spoilage. But there is a restlessness in him, a kind of ticking beneath the surface, as if he is not yet committed to the stillness the island demands. You see it in the way he walks the beach in the early dark, alone, his hands clasped behind his back like a captain without a crew, and in the way he sometimes speaks of Paris, or Guadeloupe, or Algiers, not with nostalgia, but with possession, as if those places were waiting for his return. When asked whether he would leave if given the chance, he only smiles and says, "That depends on the sea." Despite this, he is not distrusted, not yet. Everyone here has ghosts. Everyone here has blood on their hands, whether from war, rebellion, neglect, or birth. No one is judged for the lives they lived before the salt claimed them, but still, eyes linger on Mark longer than on the others. Still, his name is spoken in the quiet space after the fire dies down. The rest of the original islanders, those who have lived through the revolt and the exile and the rebuilding, do not resist the integration of the newcomers. There is no hierarchy to defend, no borders to patrol. What you have built here was never meant to be exclusive. It was meant only to endure, and to endure without cruelty. Yet there is still a carefulness to it all, a slow recalibration of trust. The meals shared with the six are not as loud, the laughter not as immediate. It is a different kind of warmth, measured, deliberate, and born not from suspicion, but from the need to protect what has been so painfully earned. You find yourself spending more time in the jungle now, away from the center of the village, searching for rare plants, for materials with which to make stronger salves, more effective dressings, and oils that preserve herbs better in the damp air. You take Elia with you most days, and sometimes Liev. If Anik can be left with another, the child, now several months old, is beginning to crawl. Her limbs are strong, her gaze steady, and she babbles with a kind of conviction that makes everyone around her laugh with delight. Her favorite word seems to be "ah," which she utters in every tone imaginable: surprise, demand, joy, curiosity, and which the others have adopted as an affectionate name for her. During one of your treks, you stumble upon a clearing you had never seen before. The air is different here, drier, lighter, with the scent of citrus and earth. There is a shallow pool at the center, fed by a spring trickling down from a rock wall carved by time into smooth shelves. Around the edge grow flowers with petals like wax, deep red and gold, and moss that glows faintly in the late afternoon light. You do not speak when you see it. Neither does Elia. You kneel beside the water, touch its surface with your fingertips, and feel something shift inside you, something ancient, something still. You return to the village that night with your satchel full and your silence intact. Over the next days, you find yourself thinking of the clearing more often. You dream of it. You imagine building something there, not a shelter, but a place, a circle, a center. You speak of it to Liev, and she listens, nodding slowly. "Perhaps it's where we bury the next one," she says, "but not in grief, in honor." You begin collecting stones. Meanwhile, the elders Kofi among them begin discussing the future again. Not just survival, but sustainability. There is talk of canoes, of navigation, of charting the currents with leaves and bone, of reaching other islands, not for escape, not to abandon this one, but to build a net of places, a network of kin. Elia listens, fascinated. She tells you one night, as she helps grind ginger root, maybe the baby's first voyage won't be on land, but between islands. Maybe she'll be the one who links us all. You smile, let her grow teeth first. And yet, the thought lingers. One morning, while preparing a tincture with Jean beneath the canopy of your shelter, you hear a noise unlike any other you've heard since the revolt, high-pitched, metallic, unnatural. It is a bell, not the kind tied to a goat's neck or rigged to a fishing line, but a proper bell struck with purpose. It comes from the western ridge. All movement stops. You stand, wiping your hands on a cloth. Jean lifts her chin. Someone else calls out a wordless alert. Within minutes, you and Kofi and a half-dozen others are moving toward the source of the sound, your feet light on the path, your ears straining. When you reach the crest of the ridge, what you see is simple and staggering. A ship, not the Étoile Blanche, not the De Zevenhovelen. A new ship, small, two-masted, with patched sails and a painted hull, anchored in the cove. And beside it, stepping onto the sand, are three figures. One of them carries a bell. The other carries a satchel. The third carries a white cloth tied to a stick. They are not soldiers. They are not slavers. They look like you. When you descend the slope, they do not reach for weapons. Instead, the eldest of them, a woman with silver at her temples and hands browned from sun and salt, speaks. "We came because of the ones who left," she says. "They told us there was a place." You exhale. There are no drums that night, no feasts, no chants, only conversation, only the telling of stories, only the quiet astonishment of hearing, from someone you've never met, the name of a child who bears your herbs on her skin, your lullabies in her ears. The world, it seems, has not forgotten you. And now, you must decide what to do with being remembered. The days that follow the arrival of the three travelers unfold not like a storm or a disruption, but like the opening of a long-sealed letter, an event less explosive than inevitable, a moment whose true weight comes not from its volume, but from the implications quietly nestled inside. They have come not in search of conquest, not with flags or chains or ledgers, but with questions, stories, and the wary hope of those who have heard through rumor, through chance, through whispered testimony that somewhere, in a world otherwise divided by commerce, cruelty, and hunger, there exists a patch of land where no one owns anyone else. Their ship is small, battered but carefully maintained. Its hull painted a faded ochre, trimmed with what once might have been forest green. The sails are quilted from a dozen fabrics, stitched and restitched over time, each square telling its own quiet tale of salvage and repurpose. They call their vessel La Brèche, the breach, a name chosen not, they explain, for war or violence, but for the moment in a wall when light first slips through. The woman with silvered hair is called Maman Aurel, though whether she is truly a mother, or whether the name is an honorific bestowed by her companions, is not entirely clear. She speaks slowly, with a thick accent whose roots seem tangled in Africa, the Caribbean, and French ports. Her hands are large and scarred, her knuckles thick from work, and she wears her salt-stained clothes with the quiet dignity of someone who no longer tries to impress anyone. The second, a middle-aged man with wiry arms and a quick tongue, introduces himself as Bastian. He talks in circles, always in metaphor, often in riddles, but it becomes clear within minutes that he is the navigator, the one who watches the stars, who can smell the difference between good wind and foul. The third is a girl named Seraphine, scarcely older than Alia, with hair bound in tight plaits, bare feet hardened from years without shoes, and eyes like thunder clouds gray, shifting, holding more in their silence than most can say aloud. The three of them are welcomed cautiously at first. The memory of the Étoile Blanche survivors is still fresh, and while that integration proved peaceful, it taught the village to remain deliberate, not closed, but protective. Hospitality is offered water, food, shelter, but no promises are made, no names exchanged in full. For 2 nights, the visitors sleep in a lean-to near the fishing racks, and though no one watches them overtly, there is always someone awake nearby. But Maman Aurèle understands this. She does not press. On the 3rd day, she requests an audience her words before the fire. She waits until the sun has dipped low and the air smells of tamarind and charred fish. When the villagers have gathered, forming a wide crescent of woven mats and logs, she rises with the slow, deliberate grace of a woman who understands that silence can carry more weight than proclamation. "We did not come to take," she begins. "We came to remember." No one interrupts. She continues, her voice low and full of gravel. "After the revolt, after the survivors of the slave ship escaped, word reached us. Not by messenger, not by paper, but by people. People who left the ships. People who found ports that asked no questions. They spoke of a place where a baby was born beneath gunfire, where the women carried their dead with their own hands, where no one raised a flag, but all raised each other." She pauses, letting the words hang in the smoky air. "We did not believe it," she says. "How could we?" But then someone came who had seen it, who had stayed, even if only for days. They said it was not perfect, that there was pain, that there was work, but they said it was free. At the word free, something shifts, not dramatically, not visibly, but inwardly. You feel it, in the spine, in the heart, in the breath. Bastian stands then, holding out a small leather-bound journal. "We brought pages," he says, "not gifts, not tribute, just words, in case you wanted to know what the world is saying." Kofi takes the book. He does not open it. He simply nods. The meeting ends without ceremony. People return to their shelters, not dismissively, but in reflection. Something large has begun, and no one yet knows its shape. Over the next days, Maman Aurèle walks the island slowly, speaking little, observing much. She watches Elia teach the smaller children how to identify edible plants. She sits beside Jean while she boils coconut oil for salves. She helps mend a cracked rain barrel with palm resin. She asks to learn, not because she does not know, but because she understands that to learn here is to be allowed in. One morning, she joins you and leave beneath the tamarind tree where you now dry herbs and grind powders for storage. She listens as you explain the ratios for a compress to reduce swelling, the way guava leaves must be crushed within minutes of picking, or else they lose their sting. Afterward, She rests a hand on your shoulder. You keep memory in your hands, she says. Not just in books. That is the only kind that survives salt. Liv smiles, tucking Anik closer against her hip. She keeps us all alive, she says, nodding toward you. No, Maman Aurel replies. She reminds you how to stay that way. You begin to meet more frequently, just the four of you yourself. Liev, Elia, and Maman Aurel. You sit by the spring in the hidden clearing you discovered weeks ago, the one with the waxy flowers and the echoing silence. There, stories are shared, not lessons, but histories. You speak of Bruges, of salt-laced linen, of pain so old it no longer burns but hums. Liv speaks of dreams deferred and children nearly lost. Elia shares her nightmares and her hopes, how she believes Anik will one day walk across islands and never be told no. Maman Aurel tells you of a child she bore and lost in the same week, buried in a town whose name she cannot remember. She tells you of a man who traded her for flour and vanished before the rain began. She tells you of standing at the bow of La Brèche as the stars aligned, and knowing, without explanation, that the sea was ready to open something new. You decide, together, to name the clearing, not after a person, not after a god, but after a feeling. It is called souffle breath, the place where the air becomes memory. Souffle becomes your meeting place, your circle. Others join eventually. Bastien brings music. Jean brings cloth. Mark brings maps. The clearing grows not in size, but in depth. It becomes sacred without being holy. No rituals, no dogma, just listening. Back in the village, the idea begins to grow. If visitors can find the island, so can harm. Not necessarily with guns, but with ideas. So defenses are imagined, not walls, but stories. Not weapons, but invitations. A charter is proposed, not a document, a ceremony. Everyone gathers. You light fires not to ward off, but to illuminate. Each family, each cluster, each person speaks one thing they will protect. A child says, "No one sleeps alone unless they want to." An elder says, "No one takes more than they can carry." A fisherman says, "The sea is not owed, it is asked." And you say, every voice is named before it is echoed. You feel something break open then, not like bone, like soil. And into that opening, you plant a seed, not literal, but something lives now that did not before. That night, Maman Aurel asks to speak with you alone. You walk together by moonlight, past the outer gardens, through the sleeping paths. She turns to you. "It's not just a place now," she says. "It's a pulse." You nod. "I've sailed for decades," she says, "seen every coast. And always, the pattern they build, then claim, then bleed, then bury." You say nothing. "But this," she continues, "this is not building. This is growing." You breathe in the scent of sea and leaf. She touches your arm. They will come again, more of them, some soft, some with sharp teeth. You meet her gaze. "We won't raise walls." She smiles. "No, you'll raise gardens, and you'll outlast them." She gives you a pouch. Inside seeds. From 4 continents. She leaves 3 days later. Her ship sails with the tide. No fanfare, no parade. Just ripples. You stand on the beach with Anik in your arms. She clutches your collar and looks toward the sea. She does not cry. And for the first time, you realize she may not remember the salt the way you do. She may only remember the soil. And that, perhaps, is the point. The days become longer. Not because the sun shifts, it always has its rhythms. And even here near the equator, the changes are subtle, but because something in your perception has shifted. Something in the way time now stretches between events, thick and warm like molasses left too long in the sun. There is no more urgency, no more scrambling from one crisis to the next. The hunger that once gnawed at your ribs has gone quiet. The fear that once crouched behind every unfamiliar sound has dissolved into the rustle of the wind in the trees. And with this change, a different kind of attention begins to bloom. You begin to notice the way the sea reflects not only the sky, but the thoughts of those who walk beside it. You see how Mark, whose restlessness once marked him like a wound, now walks the beach not with a captain's anxious stride, but with the measured steps of someone learning again how to listen. You watch as Jean weaves not only nets and sails, but also quiet stories into the fabric of her work stories of Marseille, of market songs and alleyways, of a mother's laughter and the weight of empty rooms. You hear Seraphine sing to the goats with a voice that cracks and wavers, but carries something older than melody, something that draws the animals closer and keeps even the most skeptical villagers still for a breath longer than they intended. One morning, just as the air begins to shift from cool to warm, you wake to the sound of drums not urgent, not frantic, but deliberate. You recognize the rhythm instantly, not a call to arms, but a call to gather. You rise, dress quickly, and make your way through the village. Others emerge from shelters and hammocks, from gardens and sleeping mats, drawn by the same pulse. At the center of the village, where the fire pit was first dug and later circled in polished stone, the gathering has already begun. Kofi stands there, his hands clasped behind his back, his face solemn but not tense. Liev is beside him, Anik on her hip, the child blinking sleepily but content. Etienne has climbed the nearest tree and now watches from a high branch, swinging his legs in slow arcs. Kofi raises one hand. Silence falls. "We have lived here," he says, "for more than a year now." A murmur of acknowledgement. We have made something that was not given. We have grown what no ship ever brought. We have taken death and turned it into bread. And now we must decide what to become. His words linger. You understand. It is time. The idea, spoken aloud, is simple. The implications, however, are vast. To remain hidden forever is not feasible. Others will come. Some, like Maman Aurel, will come in peace. Others may come with maps, with men, with questions. To pretend the island does not exist would be foolish. To pretend it can be protected by secrecy alone would be fatal. So a decision must be made not to vanish, but to declare, not to beg recognition, but to define it. They propose a covenant, not a government, not a hierarchy, a shared promise. The drafting takes days. Everyone contributes, everyone argues, everyone revises. The final result is not perfect, but it is yours. The Covenant of the Saltborn, it is called, and it begins. We are not subjects, we are not possessions, we are not debts, nor debts repaid. We are not lines on a map, nor entries in a ledger. We are breath, we are bread, we are bruised fruit and surviving seeds. We are the ones who remember the sound of chains but no longer live by their echo. The covenant goes on to describe simple laws. No one may be owned. No voice may be silenced. No harm may be hidden. No food may be hoarded beyond the needs of the day. No child may be punished for the scars of the past. And finally, The sea brought us pain. The sea may yet bring us peace, but only if we sail it on our own terms. When it is read aloud, there is no applause, just the wind and tears, the kind that sting, not from sadness, but from release. You are tasked with keeping the original copy, not because you wrote it, but because, as Leave says, you were the first to witness both death and life here. It belongs with you. You place it in a watertight pouch, then bury it beneath a flat stone in souffle. The clearing. It is marked only with a circle of pebbles and the pressed handprint of a child onyx, still damp with earth when it was made. And the village moves on. But everything is different. You begin teaching others not just how to heal wounds, but how to prevent them. Mark shows the younger ones how to read the sea, how to know when a current has turned treacherous, how to see a squall before it gathers. Aaliyah writes songs now, not long ones, simple, for children, for memory. Bastian maps the stars. Jean plants a garden of dyes indigo, madder, turmeric. And you begin thinking about what comes next. Not for you, for them. Because one day, a ship will come that doesn't ask. It will anchor and assume. And when that happens, the people here must know who they are. Not as survivors, as founders. You begin to gather the children on the western beach, under the bent tree with roots that curl like question marks. There, you tell stories, not fairy tales, not myths, the truth. As much as you know, you tell them of the storm, of the birth, of the scream that split the dark. You tell them of fire and salt and silence. And you tell them of the moment when silence turned into singing. One evening, as you're preparing cassava cakes near the fire, Etienne approaches. He's taller now. His voice no longer breaks. He walks with confidence, a boy turned toward manhood. He sits beside you, silent for a while, then says, "I want to build a boat." You raise an eyebrow. Not to leave, he clarifies, to explore, to connect. You nod. There's another island, he says. 2 days west. I've seen the birds. You think of what Maman Aurel said. You think of Anik, now walking on her own, always barefoot, always talking to the sea as if it will answer. You think of the covenant, and you say, then build it. The boat takes 6 months. It is small, strong, named Resonance. When it's finished, there is a ceremony. Etienne will sail it. Not alone, he'll take Seraphine, and another boy named Noel, who was born here, under the mango tree during the first dry season. They wear garlands of coral and dried hibiscus. You give Etienne your satchel, not to keep, to carry. You place inside it herbs and cloth and a single page of the covenant. Just in case, when the boat launches, the whole village walks to the water's edge. There is no speech, no fanfare, just eyes, just hope, just the sound of a sail catching wind. And then, quiet, and a new story beginning. The sea breathes softly now. Its tides lap not with hunger, but with memory, a memory that once bit like iron and now flows like lullabies whispered in the dark. You sit at the edge of souffle, the clearing cradled by palms and moss, and you listen, not to voices or footsteps or drums, but to something deeper, the slow, rhythmic murmur of a world remade, not by kings or captains, but by hands calloused from carrying more than they ever should have been asked to bear. The air is warm tonight. The stars blink like old eyes that have seen too much to be surprised. and yet still choose to shine. Somewhere, Onyx sleeps, her curls tangled in cloth that smells of clove and sea. Somewhere, a canoe waits on a new shore, its sail tucked against its mast like a secret kept safe. Somewhere, others will arrive not to conquer, but to learn the shape of a silence that heals instead of hides. You close your eyes, not to forget, to remember differently. The blood has dried, the chains are rusted, the cries have given way to songs no empire can own. And though the world may not know this island by name, it exists, like breath, like roots, like the hush before dawn. You are not a ghost. You are not a witness. You are the story itself. And now you may rest, because the sea no longer waits with open jaws. It waits with open arms. And you, salt-born and soot-stained, cradling both sorrow and survival in equal measure, you have brought it peace. Sleep now. The tide will carry the next chapter. Gently, quietly, as all the best stories do.